Greetings, I'm Reverend Yue McCormick, Head Minister of Endyuzan, Perfect Dragon Mountain, Shinganji, True Vow Temple of the Nichiren Shu Sangha of the San Francisco Bay Area. In this presentation in 4 parts, it is my goal to cover those things about the teachings of Nichiren Shonin that Nichiren Shu expects its clergy to know. I feel that this might also be of interest to dedicated lay practitioners, as well as those who are curious about Nichiren Buddhism and would like to know more about its founder. In addition to the history and teachings of Nichiren Buddhism, I have also drawn upon material from the 7-volume series Writings of Nichiren Shonin, published by the Nichiren Shu Overseas Propagation and Promotion Association. I will cite these volumes with the initials W and S, the volume number, and the page number of that volume. I also provide citations from corresponding passages, when there are any, in the Writings of Nichiren Daishonin, which is in 2 volumes. I will cite these volumes with the initials W and D, and then the volume and page number. I cite these for the purpose of comparison with the Nichiren Shu translations and on those occasions when they provide the only English translation widely available. Much of the information in these presentations come from the following sources: Genealogical Chart of the Buddha's Lifetime Teachings in 5 Periods, WNS 3, pages 238 to 250. Diagram of the 5 Periods of the Buddha's Lifetime Teachings, WND 2, pages 238 to 243. Another one by the same name, Diagram of the 5 Periods of the Buddha's Lifetime Teachings, WND2, pages 736 to 739. And finally, the Rooster Diagram of the 5 Periods of the Buddha's Lifetime Teachings, WND2, pages 1035 to 1042. That one, the Rooster Diagram, corresponds to the Nichiren Shu translation. A guide to the Tiantai Fourfold Teachings and Tiantai Lotus texts is also used. That is on pages 151 to 210 of Tiantai Lotus text, published by the Bukkyo Dendo Kyokai. I will note that material appearing in dark red rather than black is material that is either not covered or not covered in detail in the book History and Teachings of Nichiren Buddhism, published by the Nichiren Shu Text Editorial Committee. This is material that I personally feel is important for Nichiren Buddhist practitioners to be familiar with, especially clergy and lay teachers. Now let's begin the third of the 4 parts. If one accepts that the Dharma, hidden in the depths of the main discourse of the original gate of the Lotus Sutra, is the ultimate teaching that we should follow to attain Buddhahood and transform this world into a pure land, who is the Buddha that we should follow? It would seem that the Buddha we should take refuge in is the Buddha who taught the original gate, which is to say the eternal Shakyamuni Buddha. But why should this matter? Isn't it enough just to practice Buddhism and attain Buddhahood ourselves? Why should it matter whether or not we treat the eternal Shakyamuni Buddha or some other Buddha who teaches the Dharma as the Honzon, our focus of devotion? Why even have a focus of devotion in terms of a personal being? For Nichiren Shonin and his East Asian Buddhist contemporaries, it went without saying that one should live a life of gratitude and reverence towards one's ruler, one's teachers, and one's parents. He believed that the eternal Shakyamuni Buddha embodies the virtues of all 3, and therefore should be our primary focus of devotion. He felt strongly enough about this that one of his 5 major writings, the Essay on Gratitude, or Hoanjo, is a long reflection on this theme. In the genealogical chart of the Buddha's lifetime teachings in 5 periods, Nichiren Shonin states, quote, Shakyamuni Buddha is equipped with the 3 virtues of a ruler, teacher, and parent. As a ruler, he protects the people. As a teacher, he guides the people. And as a parent, he loves the people. It is only he who is perfectly equipped with these 3 virtues. WNS 3, page 244, and also WND 2, page 1039. Nichiren Shonin also cites verses from Chapter 3, a parable of the Lotus Sutra, that is taken to be Shakyamuni Buddha's expression of these 3 virtues. The verse reads, Now this threefold world is all my domain, and the living beings in it are all my children. But now it is filled with disaster and trouble, and only I am able to rescue them. This can be found in the Threefold Lotus Sutra, page 109. Now this threefold world is all my domain is taken to mean that the Buddha is like a ruler who protects all the people in the triple world of desire, form, and formlessness. But now it is filled with disaster and trouble, and only I am able to rescue and protect them, is taken to mean that the Buddha is the enlightened teacher who can guide us, all of us, to Buddhahood. And the living beings in it are all my children is taken to mean that the Buddha is like a loving parent who looks upon us as his children, who are each Buddhas in spiritual infancy. Here are several questions that may arise for us that would not have arisen for Nichiren Shonin. We now live in a culture where our ancestors, and even sometimes our parents, are not looked upon with unquestioning reverence. We think less in terms of legacies that must be preserved, and more in terms of tragic problems, abuse, and trauma being passed down to us. As for rulers, even in supposedly democratic countries, politicians and public servants are assumed to be corrupt and only working for themselves and the special interests who have them in their pockets. We are more often than not wary rather than grateful or appreciative of rulers. As for teachers and even experts like doctors and scientists, many people now think that they have nothing they need to learn that they can't pick up from the internet. Everyone feels that they can be their own expert and that scientists and doctors are simply spokespeople for various hidden agendas. For Nichiren Shonin lived in a society where it is assumed that one should naturally feel reverence for rulers, teachers, and parents. We now live in a society where all and everyone is suspect, distrusted, corrupt, and even exploitive and abusive. To say that the Buddha is like a ruler, teacher, or parent does not inspire reverence, but simply makes the Buddha triply suspect. Here, however, we should perhaps cast our suspicion upon ourselves and what our societies become. In the past, our values as a society, or at least in theory, rooted in the natural love and support that should exist between family members, and especially in the love of parents for their children, and of love, reverence, and gratitude of children towards their parents and family members who nurtured and raised them. Teachers were respected for their knowledge and what they could pass down to those they taught. Rulers were often feared, even hated, more than respected. But it was appreciated that for society to function at all, there need to be rules and enforcers of the rules and keepers of the peace to prevent wanton killing, stealing, and all other manner of violence and mayhem, as well as dishonesty and cheating in trade. Now we have created a society so corrupt, paranoid, and inhuman that rulers, teachers, and parents are no longer worthy of respect, but have become objects of scorn and suspicion. How can a society such as ours remain sustainable? How can we restore the natural human functions of having rulers, or at least elected representatives, who can be entrusted with the good of the community? Teachers who can be trusted with the education of our children, and parents who can function as parents. For Nichiren Shonin's part, he considered the seriousness of the various kinds of transgressions that are committed by those who would give in to their egotism, express ingratitude and irreverence, and even attack these sources of natural values. In Nichiren's time, the legal codes enumerated 8 grave offenses. For instance, rebelling against the government, destruction of imperial tombs, betraying one's country to the enemy, assaulting or killing parents, grandparents, or family members, including in-laws, mass murders, cruel homicides, putting a fatal curse on someone, assault of family members, or murder of distant relations, offending the dignity of a reigning sovereign or state, transgressions against one's quote-unquote parents or quote-unquote grandparents in terms of a lineage, murder of masters, rulers, high-class monks, or iniquitous pleasures, or remarriages during the time of mourning for a spouse. Nichiren Shonin identified this list with going against the ruler. This makes sense, since 5 out of the 8 of these deal with crimes against the government or state. 7 grave offenses are taught in the Brahmanet Sutra. They are killing one's mother, killing one's father, killing an arhat, injuring the Buddha, causing a schism in the Sangha, killing one's preceptor, or killing an acharya. Nichiren Shonin identified these offenses with going against the teacher, since they are simply the 5 grave offenses, which we will look at next, with the addition of the offenses of killing one's preceptor in the monastic Sangha, or killing an acharya, which is an eminent monk who would be an educator of other monks. 5 grave offenses, which are offenses which are said to cause the transgressor to be reborn in their next life in the hell of incessant suffering. These are held in Buddhism to be the most serious offenses of all. They are killing one's mother, killing one's father, killing an arhat, injuring the Buddha, or causing a schism in the Sangha. Since the first 2 were to kill one's mother or father, Nichiren Shonin identified this list with going against one's parents. Here it may be worth mentioning that the Buddha warned that those who disregarded the 2 inner guardians were capable of any kind of crime. These two inner guardians are moral dread, in Sanskrit apatropya, which can also be translated as fear of blame or modesty. And the other guardian is moral shame, in Sanskrit hri, which can also be translated as conscience, decency, or self-respect. This first, moral dread, is to care about how people we respect will look upon our actions and character. The second, moral shame, is about our own self-respect. Without respect for anyone else, such as wise rulers, teachers, and parents, or for oneself, there is no unwholesome deed that a person will not refrain from. But if there is at least respect for ourselves and for wise benefactors, then we will be motivated to take care in what we do, so that we ourselves can become rulers, teachers, and parents worthy of respect. Here we must note that as important as it is not to go against our rulers, teachers, and parents, in his essay on gratitude, Nichiren Shonin argues that to truly repay our debt of gratitude to our rulers, teachers, and parents, we must disobey them. He says, "What is the best way for Buddhists to express their gratitude for the unfathomable kindness that they have received? Mastering Buddhism completely and to be sagacious is the way. How can anyone guide blind persons across a bridge if he himself is blind? How can a captain who does not know the direction of the wind sail his ship to transport many merchants to a mountain of treasure? Mastering Buddhism, however, remains impossible without enough time to absorb it. And if you are to devote enough time to studying Buddhism, it will be nearly impossible to obey one's parents, teachers, and rulers as well. Those who aim at attaining Buddhahood cannot afford to be obedient to parents, teachers, and rulers until they reach the ultimate way to cut the chain of birth and death. Most people consider disobeying one's parents and rulers to be against the morals of society and wishes of the Buddha. In some of the non-Buddhist writings, the canon of filial piety, however, it is stated that sometimes one can remain loyal to one's ruler and filial to his parents, even if he does not obey them, and even if he admonishes them. A Buddha sutra states, "The true way of recompensing indebtedness to parents is to stop obeying them and to enter the true way of Buddhism." For instance, Pi Khan, despite disobeying his ruler, King Zhou of Yin, was considered a man of wisdom in Confucianism. In Buddhism, Prince Siddhartha, who disobeyed his father, King Shuddhodana, became the most filial son in the triple world. Nichiren Shonin is therefore not simply promoting the values of mindless loyalty and filial piety and transferring those values to Buddhism. He is saying that as important as these values are, or at least were for him and in his culture, the value of seeking the true Dharma at all costs is much higher. And as important as our country, teacher, parents, and other benefactors may or should be to us, the Buddha should be regarded even more highly, because he is the teacher of the Dharma by which we can attain liberation for ourselves and others. In other words, rulers, teachers, and parents are sources of imperfect, conditioned value. But the Buddha, the Dharma he teaches, and the Sangha that upholds and practices the Dharma represent an unconditional source of perfected value. Therefore, as serious as all the transgressions against rulers, teachers, and parents may be, transgressing against the true Dharma and the Buddha is much worse, because it is a transgression against a source of transcendent and not merely worldly value. In A Clarification of Slandering the True Dharma, the Ken Hobo Sho, Nichiren says, "The transgression of slandering the true Dharma, though repented, is 1,000 times as heavy as that of the 5 grave offenses, to say nothing of slanderers of the true Dharma, who do not repent and thus would never be released from the hell of incessant suffering." Further on, he clarifies what slander of the true Dharma means. Great Master Tiantai explains in his commentary on the Brahmanet Sutra, the term slander means to go against. We may say slandering the true Dharma means to go against the teaching of the Buddha. Vasubandhu's treatise on the Buddha nature expounds, hate means to go against principle. It means that to slander the true Dharma equals causing people to abandon it. In his own day, Nichiren Shonin singled out 4 schools of Buddhism as the chief slanderers of the true Dharma. He is infamous for his 4 maxims, that the Nembutsu school leads to the hell of incessant suffering. The Zen school is the work of heavenly devils. The mantra school ruins the country, and the discipline school is a traitor to the nation. But why did Nichiren Shonin target these 4 schools of Buddhism? One reason is that in his day, these were not so much separate, distinct schools of Buddhism, so much as popular movements that also had government support, which were teaching approaches to Buddhism and ways of practicing Buddhism that denigrated, ignored, or even negated the Lotus Sutra. So, for instance, the Nembutsu school teaches that the Lotus Sutra cannot help, but is a distraction from faith in Amitabha Buddha. The Zen school teaches that the Lotus Sutra is a mere expedient, and that one must rely on a Zen master to attain Buddhahood. The mantra teachings subordinated the Lotus Sutra to magic and ritual empowerments, ultimately making it seem superfluous. And finally, the discipline school insists that it is the pre-Mahayana precepts of ancient India that matter more than the Lotus Sutra. In our own day, we should not, as practitioners of Nichiren Buddhism, make ourselves obnoxious by perpetuating medieval sectarian polemics. However, it is good to keep in mind that according to Nichiren Shonin's teachings, we can directly practice the Buddha's highest teaching, the Lotus Sutra, and sow the seed of Buddhahood through the practice of Odaimoku, without worrying that we need to worship an externalized savior to attain Buddhahood in another realm after death, or that we need to receive the Dharma from an enlightened master. In fact, Nichiren Buddhism teaches that we inherit the Dharma directly from the scrolls of the Lotus Sutra, or that we need undergo esoteric initiations and empowerments to practice, or that we must follow rites and rules from another time and culture. Through the Odaimoku, we awaken our Buddha nature, realize that this is the Pure Land, inherit the eternal Buddha's merit and wisdom, empower ourselves and others, and realize for ourselves what is fitting or not in each situation we meet. As a teacher of the Lotus Sutra, the most profound and universally liberating teaching, it was clear to Nichiren Shonin that it was Shakyamuni Buddha above all who should be revered. However, Nichiren Shonin did not mean the historical Shakyamuni Buddha, but only the eternal Shakyamuni Buddha of chapter 16 of the Lotus Sutra who is worthy of our veneration. To understand why it is specifically the eternal Shakyamuni Buddha of chapter 16, we must consider the Mahayana teaching of the three bodies of a Buddha and Great Master Tiantai's understanding of how this applied to the Lotus Sutra. In Juri's understanding, there are four kinds of lands, or pure lands, presided over by Buddhas. First, there are lands of sages and common mortals, or lands of coexistence. This would be a world like ours, wherein a Buddha in a body of accommodation, the, in Sanskrit, Nirmanakaya, appears to teach others the way to escape rebirth. This would describe the historical Shakyamuni Buddha, who is born into this Saha world, or the world of endurance, as a prince, renounced palace life, attained Buddhahood under the Bodhi tree, seemingly for the first time, taught the Dharma for 50 years, and then entered final nirvana, in other words, passed away at the age of 80. Naturally, it is this kind of Buddha that is associated with the virtue of the teacher. Then there are the lands of transition, though more literally these are called the lands of remaining skillful means. These pure lands are where bodhisattvas reside, and also those arhats and privately awakened ones who had attained final nirvana but are about to embark upon the one vehicle to Buddhahood. A land of transition is presided over by a Buddha in a superior accommodative body. Such a Buddha is exalted with the 32 major marks and 80 minor marks of a great sage, but still appears as a Buddha with a beginning and an end. Next to the lands of actual reward are true recompense. These are pure lands created and presided over by Buddhas in their reward bodies, or sometimes enjoyment bodies, is an alternate translation of the Sanskrit term Sambhogakaya. The reward body is the glorified body of a Buddha that appears as a fruition of all their merit and wisdom. In a sense, it is a personification of their merit and wisdom. It can only be perceived by advanced bodhisattvas. Though it has a beginning at the moment of attaining Buddhahood, it has no set end and may continue to appear for innumerable eons. The reward body of a Buddha is said to emanate innumerable accommodative bodies in order to benefit sentient beings. Vairocana is said to be the name of the reward body Buddha who emanated the historical Shakyamuni Buddha. Other Buddhas presiding over pure lands may also be considered reward body Buddhas, such as Amitabha Buddha or Medicine Master Buddha. The reward body of a Buddha is associated with the virtue of a ruler, in that they rule over the pure lands that they create, so as to provide optimal conditions for attaining Buddhahood for the bodhisattvas. Finally, there is the land of eternally tranquil light, which is the pure land of the eternal Buddha. This pure land is especially associated with the Dharma body, which is the true nature of reality that all Buddhas awaken to as their own true nature. The Dharma body has no beginning or end. It is unborn and deathless. The Dharma body is sometimes personified as Mahavirachana Buddha. The Dharma body is associated with the virtue of a parent. According to Nichiren Shonin's genealogical chart, the focus of devotion or Hanzons of the various schools are as follows. The three Hinayana schools, the discipline, Abhidharma treasury, and completion of reality schools, all regard the historical Shakyamuni Buddha in the inferior accommodative body as their focus of devotion. The two Mahayana schools, the three treatises and Dharma characteristic schools, regard Shakyamuni Buddha revered as the superior accommodative body as their focus of devotion. The Flower Garland and Pure Land schools claim that they revere the reward body Buddhas, Vairocana Buddha and Amitabha Buddha, respectively. The Mantra or Shingon school reveres Mahavirachana Buddha as their focus of devotion, at least as he appears in the womb realm mandala. Here is what Nichiren Shonin says of the focus of devotion of the Tiantai school. Quote, the Hanzon of the Tiantai school is Shakyamuni Buddha, who had actually practiced the Bodhisattva way and attained Buddhahood in the eternal past. Buddhas such as Vairocana Buddha, Lord Teacher of the Flower Garland School, and Mahavirachana Buddha, Lord Teacher of the Mantra School, are retainers of this eternal Shakyamuni Buddha. This is from WNS3, page 250, slightly adapted, or WN2, page 1042. He also says, quote, the Buddha revealed in the original gate of the Lotus Sutra is the one attaining Buddhahood in the eternal past. He too possesses the three kinds of Buddha body. In this eternal Buddha, the three bodies are fused in one, having no beginning or end, and he lives forever from the eternal past to the infinite future to guide the people. And that is from the same source as the previous quote. The true Dharma to be followed, then, is the wonderful Dharma of the Lotus Flower Sutra that is to be upheld with joyful confidence through the practice of the Odaimoku. The Buddha to be revered as embodying the transcendent threefold virtues of ruler, teacher, and parent is a teacher of the Odaimoku, hidden in the depths of chapter 16, who is the eternal Shakyamuni Buddha embodying all three Buddha bodies, the historical body of accommodation, the glorified reward body, personifying all the merit and wisdom of Buddhahood, and the Dharma body that is the true nature of reality. In terms of the eternal Shakyamuni Buddha, all three of these bodies, not just the Dharma body, are unborn and deathless, which is actually more consistent with the Mahayana teaching that all dharmas, which is to say all phenomena, are, in their true reality, unborn and deathless, and without the duality of self and other. Nichiren Shonin also, to an extent, embodies these virtues as a representative of the eternal Shakyamuni Buddha in this world and this age. This is related to what can be called the outer and the inner transmission of the wonderful Dharma. In chapter 22, Transmission of the Lotus Sutra, the Buddha gives a general transmission of the wonderful Dharma of the Lotus Sutra to all the provisional bodhisattvas who had come from throughout the universe to make vows to spread the Lotus Sutra, or failing that, other sutras to prepare the people for the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren Shonin believed that this general transmission played out in the historical transmission of Buddhism from India to China and to Japan, especially in the lives of the historical Shakyamuni Buddha, the great master Tiantai, the great master Dengyo, who established Tendai Buddhism in Japan, and now Nichiren Shonin. Nichiren Shonin refers to this transmission in terms of the four masters in three lands, in a testimony to the prediction of the Buddha, Kembutsu Mirai Ki, daring to number himself among them as the only one truly upholding the Lotus Sutra in Japan in the 13th century. He says, I, Nichiren of Awa province, graciously received the teaching of the Lotus Sutra from three masters, Shakyamuni Buddha, Tiantai, and Dengyo, and spread it in the latter age of degeneration. Therefore I dare add myself to the three masters, calling ourselves four masters in three lands. Based on what the Buddha said in the Lotus Sutra about those who can keep, read, recite, expound, and copy the Lotus Sutra, and in light of the specific transmission given by the eternal Shakyamuni Buddha to superior practice Bodhisattva and the other Bodhisattvas who appeared from underground in chapter 21, Supernatural Powers of the Tathagata of the Lotus Sutra, Nichiren Shonin came to see himself as the messenger of the Buddha to the people of the latter age of the degeneration of the Dharma. As the messenger of the Buddha, he would have the virtues of a loving parent and guiding teacher. He would be the messenger, the protective ruler, the eternal Buddha. In the Shimayama letter, or the Shimayama Goshosoku, he wrote, it may sound self-conceited, but according to the sutras, Nichiren Shonin seems closely related to all the people of Japan, from the emperor above to all the people below. To them he has three virtues. First, the virtue of parents, second, that of teacher, and third, that of a messenger of a ruler. The messenger of the Buddha, eyes, and sun and moon mentioned in the Lotus Sutra all mean Nichiren Shonin. If it is the case that Nichiren Shonin is acting upon the specific transmission given in chapter 21, then perhaps he is an embodiment of superior practice bodhisattva. In that case, he is in a sense that bodhisattva who has received the inner transmission of the wonderful Dharma, who can propagate the true meaning of the Lotus Sutra that had been reserved for the people of the latter day. This is most clearly stated in a letter he ghost wrote for his disciple Shijo Kingo to present to his lord, called the Yorimoto's Letter of Explanation, or Yorimoto Chinjo. As a result, I have come to believe in the Lotus Sutra, in which it is expounded that Nichiren Shonin is the Bodhisattva superior practice commanded by Shakyamuni Buddha, Lord of the Saha world and parent of all living beings, to appear in the latter age of degeneration as a messenger of the Buddha with the duty of propagating the Lotus Sutra. Nichiren Shonin only began to speak this way after the Tatsunokuchi persecution. From that point on, it seems, he realized that he was no longer restricted to the historical outer transmission of the Lotus Sutra, but that he had a mission as the special envoy of the eternal Buddha to reveal a focus of devotion and way of practice, being the Daimoku, which went beyond what even the Tiantai school had taught previously. With that, I bring the third part of this four-part presentation of the teachings of Nichiren Shonin to a close. I hope that this presentation was helpful and informative and will help to enrich your faith in and practice of Nichiren Buddhism.